Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a nice lunch break. I also hope you especially had a nice coffee to give you some energy for this session. My name is Jonathan Bonadio. I'm a senior policy advisor at Solar Power Europe, and I'm delighted to accompany you for this session of National Deep Dives, the new hot markets. So actually, this session is part of 3-session cycle on national deep dives. That includes the shining example that happened yesterday, the new hot markets right now, and the unusual suspects. So if not done yet, I strongly encourage you to register for the next session that will happen in this very room, which is called the the unusual suspects. For this session, the new hot markets, we are welcoming on stage 5 national solar associations from 5 member states. We have Bulgaria, Austria, Czech Republic, Poland, and Romania. These are member states that recently distinguished themselves for having a particularly spectacular solar power development. But I must say, I'm feeling a bit embarrassed now, to be honest, because I really don't know which country I should introduce first. You know, I've been preparing this session. I've been telling myself, we're talking about solar PV deployment, potential new champions of solar. How should we rank them? Who should go first? What is the criteria to determine the first player on the markets? So I immediately thought about total installed capacity. And here we have a clear champion. We have Poland, which has currently more than 12 gigawatts of installed capacity, and still 2020 became a gigawatt market with way above 1 gigawatt new installation per year. But wait, capacity is not everything. How about the progress also of member states? And in this area, Bulgaria is the clear winner. We have in Bulgaria annual PV installation multiplied by almost 30. Yes, 3-0 between 2019 and 2020. But Bulgaria is not alone. Romania has grown its installed capacity by an average of 6 times every year from 2019 to 2020. We talk about progress, but what about the pioneers too? Already in 2014, Czech Republic had more than 2 gigawatt installed on its country. So we also have early starter here. And last but not least, we have been comparing the total installed capacity to the population of the country. And here, Austria is the clear leader with 420 watts per habitant, which is the equivalent of 1 PV panel for each Austrian citizen. So you see, it's almost impossible to rank these countries because they are all PV champions. So to introduce our guest, I have actually chosen the most infallible, perfect method. I will just follow the alphabetical order. And so to start, I have the pleasure to welcome on stage Fabian Janisch, Techniques and Energy Economy from PV Austria. Fabian, a round of applause for Fabian, please. From Bulgaria, Mariana Yaneva from Reenergy Bulgaria. From Czech Republic, and please excuse my pronunciation, we have Jan Krčmar for Solarní Asociace, Czech Republic. From Poland, we have Piotr Markowski. And from Romania, we have Irene Mihai from the Romanian Photovoltaic Association. So as you can see, we have a quite diverse panel, quite an interesting agenda with presentation, followed by a panel debate. And since we want to give time for interaction with the audience, I see there are many people here, I will pay particular attention to timekeeping. So for all our guests here, okay, when you see this sign, it means that you have 1 minute remaining for your presentation. So I do count on you to respect this time frame and to leave a space for interaction. And without further ado, I will give the floor to Fabian from PV Austria, who will present the evolution of solar PV in this country. Fabian, the floor is yours. You can go on. Yeah, you can move the station.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a good lunch, and I'm happy to pick you up after the lunch, and I hope you're not too tired. I will talk today about the hot new market in Austria. As already said, I'm Fabian Janisch, and I represent the Federal Association in Austria. First of all, who we are the industrial partner for photovoltaics, but also energy management and storage in Austria. And our goal is that PV is one pillar of the Austrian energy production or electricity supply. We work for this, and therefore we have stretched out a goal. And what you see there is now the development in Austria, in green, which was, in blue, which was last year, and in orange, which is supposed to come so we can reach our goals. You see in green there we had in 2020 a new record with about 340 megawatts. We doubled it then to over 700, and we exceeded it again last year, over 1 gigawatts per installed capacity. And what you also see is that we will have to increase those goals even more if we want those installed capacities even more if we want to reach our Austrian goals. What you also see there on the right is a smaller orange pillar. It doesn't mean that our forecast says that we will have a downfall. It says we more or less exceeded our forecast already, because this smaller orange pillar was planned for 2025, and we also already overreached it in 2022 with the blue one. What you also see is the two orange pillars on the right, where we want to go, about 1.7 gigawatts installed per year. It's the first one, we want to reach it by 2030. And we will have to install 1.7 gigawatts per year each year from 2030 to 2040. So why do we want to do this? What about the Austrian goals? We have two goals in Austria. The first one is to have 100% renewable electricity production by 2030. Our goal is called Mission 2030, national and on average. So the national production, of course, on average means that if we produce more energy in the summer and we import in the winter, it can still be 100% renewable. So it's kind of, I call it sketchy, but still a good goal to be 100% renewable. And interesting it is in Austria that we have a renewable expansion law, where this goal is set into numbers in a law. So we know exactly what power or capacities we need to install that we reach those goals, and it gives us a really good lever. I will come back to this a little bit later. The second goal which we have in Austria is to be climate neutral by 2040. It's in gray now because there is no law for it, but it's talked about it quite a lot. Short introduction to the electricity production right now in Austria. You see in blue, that's water power. Green are other renewables, and in red are more or less fossil fuels, mainly gas. And you see that there is no nuclear power, and it's just a rather small share of fossil fuels already, and the goal is to close this gap until 2030 with renewables. Talking about the goal of 2030, you see there how it's supposed to be reached. You see a small share of water power which will be additionally installed, but the main share will be photovoltaics. So we more or less have reached the goal for water power, and we will drive to close it with wind power by exceeding it to 10 terawatt hours, but the main pillar will be photovoltaics. And those numbers are written down in our law, and it's, as already said, a good lever to go to the federal ministries and say, where are your plans? We need to match those goals. My last slide is a graph which was provided by our grid providers, how they see will the installed capacity look in Austria over the next 15 years. The first pillar, or the middle pillar, is for 2030, and the last pillar is for 2040. So you see that there will be a lot of PV power be installed in Austria until 2040, about 30 gigawatts. And what you also see there is, if we don't provide the grid, it won't be possible to install all this PV power into our energy system. So we're looking forward to these big yellow parts, and I guess this was my 5-minute presentation. Thank you.
Thanks indeed, Fabian, for this insight. I will now leave the floor to Mariana.
Shall I start?
You can stay here on stage. It's up to you. I will give you the clicker.
I will break the rules and present from here, because the story that you will hear from Bulgaria is a lot different than that of Austria. Jonathan presented me as Renergy, but this is the company that I work for, a technical advisor and an electrical engineering design company for solar and storage. Today, I will represent another hat that I wear, and this is a policy director for Bulgarian-based Association for Production, Storage and Trading of Electricity. And as the name of the association suggests, it has a much broader profile and integrates solar, wind developers, consultancies, storage integrators, and of course, utilities and traders that help deliver that energy to the market. And Bulgaria is a very interesting market. Today I will tell you a little bit about the history that we had from 2010, perhaps, when the market was booming for solar and other renewables, how it developed through the years, what could we expect for the next 10 years. And last but not least, I will invite you to come to Sofia on May 18 and 19th, that we are organizing an event under the Resource brand for Southeast Europe, and it will bring more knowledge on Bulgaria, but also Romania and Greece as a package. So how did Bulgaria come into the solar market? This is the history of solar and other renewables, and it may remind you a little bit of the story of many markets, but this is generally how you want to develop a market. This is a boom and bust history for the solar sector. In the not so distant year 2012, Bulgaria was a gigawatt market in Europe, despite having a population of about 6 million and a total installed capacity in the power sector of about 12 gigawatts. So after that, there was a big slash in tariffs, in retroactively taking revenue from the developers, so it destroyed the trust in the sector and how it developed, and it flatlined for about 5 years. And that began to change in 2019 because the market and the technology grew mature enough to offer a pure economically based business model. So savings on the energy bill is the main driver for Bulgaria to install solar and to look to renewables. And this is a market that's entirely driven bottom up. So you may have heard we are in currently a very difficult political situation, not having a stable government for the past 2 years, and severely lagging on transposing EU legislation in the renewables era. That doesn't help the sector to accelerate, but it's also kind of keeping stable conditions for the developers to know the rules, how to develop current projects. And what you see on this slide is actually how the sector develops, how the NSCP target is the gray column that you see. That is what we have stipulated in the National Energy and Climate Plan, together with the European Union. The blue column is how actual installations are looking currently, and the yellow is, of course, what we forecast as an association, is the potential of the market really getting on the grid. And so far, you can see actual installations are in between what is projected by the government and what we, as an association, think it's the potential to safely connect to the grid at the moment. What are the market drivers? As I told you, the main driver is, of course, the economic benefit that you have from solar, the predictability, stability of prices, and solar is currently offering the cheapest energy that you can get in any market. There are a lot of concerns on energy security and independence that kind of moved up on the agenda on many companies and also in the society. And last but not least, these are the climate neutrality goals and the corporate culture surrounding these goals that is slowly coming up the social agenda in Eastern Europe, in Bulgaria as well. The challenges, of course, are not small. There is a lot of restrictive regulation that was built around the older system of thermal power stations, taking the prime spot. There is excessive red tape around the development of projects. Of course, the cost of finance is always a problem in Eastern Europe because it's higher than what you can get in Western Europe. And the complexity of the technological and market choices you need to make to build your business model is something that's very difficult to overcome. So, if you want to learn more about our market in Romania and Greece as well, please come in Sofia on the 19th and 18th of May. We will talk a whole full days about these problems and the markets and how they develop. Thank you.
Sir? Thanks indeed, Mariana. I will now leave the floor to Jan to explain a bit the Czech Republic.
Thank you.
case.
I think I'll also stand because it's always nice to stretch my legs. So hello, from me, my name is Jan Krčma, or Krečma, to make it easier, from the Czech Solar Association. No, there we go. My presentation is called the second Czech solar boom, even though the first one was considerably larger than the one we're experiencing now. But we think we're on the verge of another solar boom because as I say, we already had a solar boom, which if you look the development of solar, nothing, and then all of a sudden within 2 years, 2009, 2010, a lot of solar, and then almost nothing. So actually we have in the Czech Republic almost the same graph as, again, Bulgaria and many other countries, a huge spike, retroactive measures, a big drop-off, and then all of a sudden slow growth. So we currently have about 2,400 megawatt connected to the grid. Of those, 2,100 roughly were installed in 2009 and 2010, when literally the Czech Republic was one of the biggest solar markets in the world. A lot of companies had their headquarters for Europe and Middle East and Africa in Prague, relocated very quickly or went bankrupt. So again, here we have this lovely stagnation again. But you see at the end a slight movement upwards, which if you look at it in percentage wise, it's a very nice growth. Of course, you know, every year 100, 200, 300% growth. Of course, coming from nothing. So currently in the Czech Republic we have 84,000 or 85,000 solar power plants connected, 2.46 gigawatts in total. Of those, 315 megawatts with storage, about 400 and almost 500 megawatt hours of storage, which is not bad, especially with the next, with the new power plants. Residentials, we have almost 100% storage with residentials. Commercial, not so much. So it is a market where, if you consider how many people live in the Czech Republic, what our industry looks like, there's certainly a place and space to grow, and there's demands to grow. And if you just look at the facts of the current solar boom, which is up until now residential driven, we had last year more than 20,000 requests for subsidies because we have a capex subsidy on households with residentials. Last year only alone 20,000, where by the way, in just To give you give you an example, in 2019 and 2018, we built less than 20 megawatt in the entire country in 1 year. Last year, we built 33,000 solar power plants. Again, compared to the years before, very good, but again, still a lot of potential for growth. The average size of power plants is still 8.6 kilowatt because we are a residential or generally rooftop-driven market. And what you see is interesting. We only had not even 1,000 commercial rooftops last year. This will change very, very soon, this year and next year especially, and this will be one of the market drivers for the next solar boom. So now after this, I don't know, again, I'm looking at this from the Czech perspective. I don't know whether these numbers, looking at those comparatively small numbers, make you feel as depressed as usually they do myself when I look at them. But there are 4 reasons, I would say, I'm pointing out 4 reasons to be cheerful. And in terms of the hot market, I wouldn't say we're a hot market yet. We're not the market when, let's say, you want a cup of tea. We don't yet have the hot water to pour on your tea bag, but we have put the kettle on. We've started the timer on the kettle, and we're now beginning to boil the water because Czechia is a heavily industrialized country, much more than, for example, a lot of other EU countries. We have a big automotive sector, steel works, chemical industry, a lot of big, heavy industrialized players that historically were against solar, but now all of a sudden they, for many reasons, see the need to invest in solar, and they've realized, hang on, for example, Hyundai has a factory in the Czech Republic, and they calculated that if they put panels on all of their rooftops on the factory, which is 8 megawatts, it will cover 5% of their electricity consumption. Those players are helping drive the need for large-scale, utility-scale solar. We have, thank you. We have a large amount of brownfields, some of them future, because we have coal power plants that will be shut, coal mines. We have the modernization fund. We were the first country where the modernization fund was actually implemented, and we had calls for projects open 2 years ago already, with billions of euro available for large-scale solar and other renewables, and the need for to decarbonize the electricity sector, which is still heavily fossil-based, because we're in a situation where Czechia wants to build new nuclear, but the timeline is maybe until 2035, 2040. The coal exit is planned for 2033, but I think it will happen sooner, and I think most coal companies know that as well. And solar is in the middle of all this, because we have almost no wind in the Czech Republic, and again, solar will do most of the heavy lifting, hopefully combined with storage, because what we haven't heard so far is storage, which will do the lifting with us. Maybe a few scenarios. We surpassed the NECP completely, so I think that's completely out of the question. The optimistic scenario is based on the number of applications for grid connection, which could see an annual growth of, let's say, 2.5 gigawatts by 2030. In a pessimistic scenario where we only build rooftops, we still think 1 gigawatt a year. We currently have about, I think, 15 to 20 gigawatt booked capacity with the DSOs. A lot of that won't be built, but it shows you the capacity and the outlooks of the market. And I think that's all for me from an introduction to the Czech solar market. Thank you.
Thanks indeed, Jan, and thanks also for this very optimistic vision of the way forward. We will come in.
I'm moving quickly because we don't have much time, I suppose.
Thanks. No, we are good, so we are good. You have your 5 minutes.
Can I? Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Piotr Markowski. I'm a bit impostor here. I'm a CEO of a photovoltaic company, but I have a privilege to represent Polish Photovoltaic Association today. So I will not give you advertising of the company I'm running. I was thinking how to start that presentation to avoid showing exactly the same as my colleagues how the market was growing, and I was looking for inspiration, and I got this inspiration. I hope I will not offend any British person in the room, from the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, who just recently said that Great Britain is not running proper policy, that they are in troubles because Poland average income, household average income will surpass British one in a few years. It will not be as quick, but I just wanted to show you that Polish economy was on a rapid growth since economic changes 30 years ago. And why I'm saying that, because without those strong fundamentals of economic growth, that would be very difficult to run transformation of energy market in Poland. And indeed, what we saw was an explosion of photovoltaic. Last few years, we observed amazing growth. This was mainly driven, this phase of growth, by individual consumers. Mostly prosumer market drove that change. Of course, the subsidies, government subsidies play the role, but I would say that was a starting point. That was something which triggered interest in photovoltaic. More important was thinking, what is there for me? Polish people are, I can say that, very entrepreneurial. If they see there is a good business case, even on the level of household, they will go after that. So we observed increasing price, energy price increases, and people started to calculate how they can cope with that. And after years of communism, Polish society has kind of an imprinted approach. You have to help yourself. And this is kind of a help yourself approach of Polish prosumers. And last thing I would like to mention on that slide, you may wonder what this 42% and 89% means. Those were the market surveys when people were asked, how do you think renewable energy is important? What will be the main source of energy in the country? And in 2015, less than 50% of people admitted that this is important. Right now, there is a common view across the whole society. There is no way back from renewable energy. And what is very good, even with the polarized political scene in Poland, this view is shared across voters of all political parties, which gives us sign that the changes are for good, that Poland will not change the course. And the last slide, we can say the glass is half empty or half full. You are for sure well aware that Polish energy sector is very dependent on fossil fuels. But we see this rapid growth of photovoltaic. Last year we had 4.5 gigawatt installed capacity. Our national plans, the capacity which was planned for 2030 was already delivered over a year ago. And plans for 2040 will be delivered this year. We are talking about 16 gigawatt installed capacity. So still ahead of us, but I think the future is bright, and the whole industry will observe very promising years, because we have to reduce the dark brown and light brown figures, and solar power will be the major driver in Poland. Thank you.
Thanks indeed, Piotr. Very interesting to see the market actually driven by consumers and the willingness to generate their own energy. So very, very insightful. Last but not least, we are welcoming Irene from Romania, who will provide us also some insights from her country.
I will just sit here
The floor is
because
yours. Yeah.
Bulgaria and Romania have a similar story, so I will just choose to be solidar with my colleague. So thank you, Jonathan, for giving me the floor, and thanks to the Solar Power Europe team for the invitation and for the opportunity to share Romania's story, a country that started from the impressive numbers of 0 megawatts of solar in the late 2000s that is nowadays poised to become one of the top 7 gigawatt markets by the end of this decade. Now, before commencing our dive, I find it necessary to give you a brief overview of the current situation in Romania in terms of installed capacity. So as you can see in the pie chart, Romania has a pretty diverse landscape in terms of the installed capacity. So we have hydro, wind, and solar, which have a significant share, and also we have nuclear, hydrocarbons, and coal. Now, you may be wondering why I wanted to show you this instead of anything else related to the Romanian market. Well, that's because I want you to have a better understanding of the evolutions that happened in the past decade. So, to preface the discussion, the megawatts that you see on the map above my head were installed during the early 2010 period. So, focusing on solar, the statistical data shows that Romania went from 0 in 2008 to over 1 gigawatt in less than 5 years. So you may be wondering what determined the upsurge in the solar PV development in Romania. Well, first of all, we have the natural potential of the country. As you can see, we have the Romanian map divided into 3 main regions. So we have the red zone, which has the highest PV output in the country, with over 2,300 hours of sun per year. We have the orange zone, which is the second PV output in the country, and the yellow zone, which has a lower share, but it's also very significant. Bottom line, all these zones are suitable for PV solar development, as you have seen previously. However, natural potential alone is not enough to understand the sudden development of the solar PV. So, in order to understand what happened, we need to make a short incursion in time to 2009, when the European Directive on Renewable Energy was adopted, and this directive introduced the 20% RES target for 2020, which in the Romanian legislation translated to the 24% ambition, which also gave rise to the national system of subsidies known as the Green Certificate Support Scheme. Now, what is Green Certificate Support Scheme? In essence, it's a title given by the authorities to RES producers based on the amount of energy produced and the technology used. So the certificate was issued by the state and it could be traded on a special market. The idea is that the approval of the scheme in 2011 led to the unprecedented wave of investments that you have seen in the graph there. And led to the exponential growth to over 1 gigawatt in a short period. However, the support for the scheme started to water down starting with 2013, and by 2016, the support scheme was effectively ended. So since 2016, I don't know if you can see it very well, but no significant capacities were installed. However, in spite of the fact that the solar PV market has its ups and downs in Romania, as illustrated by the wave, and it's a wave not only in the proverbial sense, but in reality, because it reached a peak and then it died down, sun is once again shining over the Romanian market. So we have new targets, we have new ambitions, and new developments at the national level. Although we didn't have many gigawatts installed in the past few years, we expect around 500 megawatts to be connected this year, and that's the information only coming from our members within the association, but the number is significantly greater considering all the developers in the Romanian market. And we also have another important development, which is the prosumers sector, which contribute to the numbers that were illustrated previously by Jonathan. So that's how Romania became one of the gigawatts market in the early 2010s, and we hope that the new wave, actually I don't want to call it a wave, we hope that it would be a sustained development in the next years to come. Thank you.
Thanks indeed, Irene. And I must say, I have to thank all the participants for really respecting the timing, because we have no time for a bit of exchange, a bit of discussion before we leave the floor to the audience. There is one simple question that I wanted to ask to you, Mariana. If you can quote 3 factors of success, if you can quote 3 elements, what would they be to become such a booming market for solar PV?
In Bulgaria.
Yeah, in Bulgaria.
So the first factor, as you see in the map, I will use the Romanian map because Bulgaria is south of Romania. So the resource is better. And solar has big potential because we have the resource in the first place. In the second, we have a lot of coal currently in the power mix, and it's getting not marketable anymore. So there is installed capacity that needs to be replaced, and it needs to be replaced with renewables, in my opinion. That's the second. And the third is because generally our markets need a little bit more flexibility from the people who go there to invest and to make the business models, but they also offer better returns. And that's the third.
Okay, very good, thanks. I wanted to ask the same question to a country with a bit less sun. I'm looking at you, Fabian. What is a recipe for success, if you can describe it in three main factors?
Okay, thank you. I think I have to reduce it to 2 factors for Austria. The first factor was, of course, the law, which was published 3 years ago, which gave a significant lever. You can use it for the federal states to push the plans, to get continuous fundings and subsidies, and it's really helped a lot. And the second, which was one of the main factors, and I think we know it all, is the Ukraine war, which was a huge disruption and presumably led also to these really high exceeding of goals from the last year. So I think those 2 factors, but if I give from one national association to another a tip, put something in the law, it's stable, but make sure that it's good numbers.
And also provide visibility to investors into the sector, which is very important. I have another question. I'm turning to you, Piotr. Based on this success in Poland, how do you see the future challenges and opportunity to continue this development for solar sector in the country? Once again, I'm very much obsessed with numbers. So if you can give you 3 enablers and 3 challenges that you can see for the future, I'd be very happy to hear your point of view.
Yeah, so I would start with the challenges. And number 1, number 2, and number 3 would be grid connection. That's what we are facing. And of course, that would be a simple answer. Everybody could give that one. I would focus here on transparency, because this is what is the challenge. What I'm hearing from investors, from our clients, that everybody is aware that we have a challenge with the grid connections, but there is limited transparency from energy companies where actually we can make that connection based on what they're deciding that this particular party will get the connection or not. So this transparency would tremendously help. So that's an opportunity and the challenge we are facing right now. Second is the challenge, and again opportunity, is the stability of regulation. So again, it's probably coming from the Polish people entrepreneurial approach. Basically, dear government, set up the rules and make them stable, and we will manage. So we are not expecting that you will do the job for us, but make this regulation stable for at least some time so we can adjust and accommodate and we can run the business. And the third one, not mentioned yet, is if we cannot cope with the grid, maybe we should move towards the storage. Maybe we should change the regulation which actually promotes and allows storage usage, which is a way to mitigate issues with the grid connection.
Very interesting. So stability and grid connection. I just have a question to complete on this. You're talking about stability of regulation. So how do you see the, for instance, the emergency measures that the EU is proposing, either on permitting? I mean, is it something which is influencing the deployment of renewables in the right way, or is it more something that adds a layer of complexity to the administration?
Yeah, so there is everywhere, and in Poland it's also the challenge with all the, especially environmental discussions. And on one hand, if we can accelerate the process, that's great, but we can cause problems on the other side. If we do those shortcuts here, we will have voters against the photovoltaic. So we have to find the right balance, not to speed up too much, not to overcome certain activities which are especially regarding the environmental elements. So I would not speed up too much. I would basically make the law as stable as possible. So this is the plan for 5 years, and in 5 years we are not changing them.
Very interesting. Also to keep the positive opinion that the public has towards photovoltaics. Irene, on your side, is also grid one of the main issues that you have been identified, and what are the enablers for the future?
Yes, grid is an issue that we have in Romania, but on top of that, we have the legislation that is a bit tricky, because in Romania it's pretty hard to develop on areas that are larger than 50 hectares because of a modification of the legislation that came last year. So the parliament introduced a new exemption from the urbanistic zonal plan that was meant for projects that were under 50 hectares in terms of size, so around 42 megawatts. But the Ministry of Agriculture interprets this exemption as the law, the general rule. So basically, they say that you cannot develop over 50 hectares. They are not trying to engage in a constructive dialogue with the association, although we have tried to reach them through letters, through all sorts of mechanisms. They do not want to give their interpretation. So basically, it's pretty hard, not impossible, but pretty hard to develop on projects that are over 42 megawatts and 50 hectares. So I would say that this is the biggest issue in Romania that we are trying to circumvent one way or another in the association.
Okay, and maybe to end on a positive tone, any enabler, anything that you see that could really leverage the installation of solar PV?
I would say the public acceptance.
Okay.
The Romanian market is pretty open to solar and renewables in general. We don't have the not in my backyard problem. So that would be what I believe that would help in the development of new projects.
Okay, thanks indeed. And yeah, Fabian, you wanted to intervene?
I want to make a small comment because grids was mentioned so often, and I have to say yes, it's also for Austria a big topic, and I think we all face the same problem, saying components, workforce, and grids, and components is a EU or a global problem maybe. Then you have workforce. It could be bureaucracy because it's inefficient. It could also be man and woman power, which is not here. But it could also be quality. But with the grid, we have a problem in Austria on the DSO level, and that's a national problem, and for us at least. And no one is gonna help us with the DSO grids. So we need to do it for ourselves, and if we don't manage the challenge of building a sufficient PV-ready DSO grid, the PV transition won't happen for us. So I wanted to point it out and hope I don't get a tricky question because I talked already too much.
I will have actually a last question to Jan on the national energy and climate plans. We are currently at 3 gigawatts in Czech Republic. The NECP for 2030 expects 4 gigawatts, which is a very limited increase. Our European market outlook said that the medium scenario is 12 gigawatts, the potential, and can go up to 22 gigawatts in a high scenario. How do you envision the update of the NECPs in this context?
To be honest, who cares? The NECP has basically no significance on we've seen this, has no significance on policy in the Czech Republic. By the way, the first version of the NECP was 0 kilowatt more, no growth until 2030. And when we pressured, with the help of Solar Power Europe, pressured our government and the Commission, they added 2 gigawatts. So we know that the NECP was literally calculated on a napkin somewhere within 20 seconds, which it's not a joke. This is how they did it. This is how the Czech Republic calculated its contribution and its NECP, the first one. So I've sort of resigned, and I don't care what the NECP will say, because it's not about the NECP. It is about industrial players. We have millions of people who live not in residential buildings, but in apartment buildings in the Czech Republic, all those old communist tower blocks. We need solar now, not according to the NECP, but we need large-scale, utility-scale solar in the grid to lower the energy prices. The industry needs PPAs. And anyway, the NECP has no significance had no effect on planning or on the DSO's planning. Had no effect on them preparing for any sort of growth, because this is the first. Last year was the first year that we were sort of in line with the NECP. And the grid operators, the DSOs, already have problems with connecting new power plants. They don't have the workforce, they don't have the capacities in some regions, they're not managing already. So, in my opinion, and we don't use the NECP, we try to use the NECP in our arguments, it never worked. What really works is we now in the Czech Republic this year pushed through 3 really great law changes. And this is, by the way, because I grew up in Austria, so I always read the Austrian news and see what Minister Gewessler pushes through herself, or maybe not only herself, of course, but every law change in renewables is in the Czech Republic is based on associations lobbying and pushing, not from the government. It always comes from us, but we push through that renewables above 1 megawatt are public interest projects, and basically you could build without having to change the local zoning plan. But this, and we never use the NECP, we use the argument, and again, those 2 good arguments, industry, coal phase out, and I agree with Fabian, if then on top of that you have a crazy murderous guy invading his neighboring country, that helps a lot, sadly, because that was the biggest change last year as well.
Thanks, Jan, for this very frank and thought-provoking answer. But I have a curious question to Mariana. Do you share the same feeling towards NECPs? And
absolutely. I second Jan's opinion. NECPs, especially in Eastern Europe, are just something that's pushed through Brussels, that you have a nice graphic and goals to follow, but this is now not how things work in Eastern Europe. So political level is still years behind its understanding of the industry, of how it works, how the market works even. Most of our power markets are half regulated, half free. So everyone who is on the free market is investing in solar. And the politicians will be surprised again of how the market is moving. You saw the chart. They're not prepared again for the growth, but this time there is no subsidy scheme, so nothing to stop really the growth of the market.
Very good, very good. But to continue on this very thought-provoking elements, and it's a shared feeling, which is very appreciated. So to continue on these thought-provoking and a bit discussion, I would like now to open the floor to the audience. We have 5-10 minutes for questions, and I always see many hands risen. So I will start with the gentleman in the back. Yeah.
Hello, I've got one, I think the same question for representatives of Austria and Czech Republic. Both of these countries are the wealthiest within this group, which is now presenting their markets. And the same, they are not the biggest one in the matter of area. So my concern is that when you were mentioning the utility scale solar, is the cost of the land lease or not in my backyard attitude will not be a significant obstacle in development of utility scale solar. Your approach is more to the big rooftop installations, or still counting on residential? Thank you.
You have to meet.
Okay, thank you. Well, we in the Czech Republic, we had this big discourse the last 10 years. Everything, everything should be focused on rooftops, and we kept saying as the association for years that it's not enough. We had other renewable associations who said, okay, please build solar only on rooftops, because if you build ground mount solar, we won't get, for example, wind power pushed through, because we will just spike, NIMBY will spike, and we kept saying this is not enough. We now have a lot of politicians convinced, and it's, for example, the Confederation of Industry and the Chamber of Commerce realized that, okay, maybe solar does not, they don't like it optically, but they need ground mount solar. Their own members, especially in the automotive branch, throughout the supply chain, companies are realizing we need solar, and we don't need the 2 megawatt on the rooftop. We need the 50 megawatts with a PPA. So, but so far we have to say we are at the beginning. So we don't really know the impact of the impact NIMBY will have. We're seeing it now with Agri PV, which we are hopefully we will have a very good law in effect from the beginning of next year, hopefully, but we might end up with being forced to build Agri PV in certain areas only. We have a problem with wind in the Czech Republic. We haven't had any wind power built for almost none for the last 15 years because of NIMBY. But I have to say, and I'm again being very open, one of the things we're telling politicians is that we have to circumvent local municipalities a bit. You can't leave everything up to people because, and by the way, this is one of the arguments I'm using all the time is the Czech Republic wants to rely on nuclear. The Czech Republic wants to rely on small modular reactors, whether that is realistic or not. And we kept telling people, if you really think that a village or a small town that is against wind and solar will want to be the first municipality with a small nuclear reactor next to them, then good luck. Okay, so and again, I'm coming back to my youth. I grew up in Austria, in Vienna. When I grew up in the 90s, there were, Vienna is surrounded by wind farms. There were none, but what there were strong local politicians who pushed this through, and who knew that it was right. And it was a tough battle. We don't really have those in the Czech Republic. So we tell a lot of the parliamentarians and the ministries, look, you can't leave everything up to the municipalities. And it is working to an extent. So as I say, we're telling them, don't leave everything up to them, decide a bit more centrally so that we can sort of evade NIMBY a little bit.
Fabian.
Okay, regarding Austria, it's a hot topic. We have a lot of tourism in Austria, which is why there's always talk about visible energy production, but it's a little bit more towards wind power. So if sometimes it's like that, if companies, or not companies, if federal states can choose, they sometimes drift more towards PV, because wind power is even more controversial. We made a study from PV Austria how far we can get if we put PV on every rooftop, and it's just not sufficient for our goals. So we therefore have the call it permission to also build it on flat scale. And last, I have to mention that the politicians have picked it up, and we have in 1/3 of our federal states already go-to areas, which manages where to build PV power plants. And it's a hot topic.
Then indeed, we can take the question from the gentleman at the very back. If you can just hand him the microphone. And then we're slowly closing the session. Yeah.
Just curious, both Poland and Czech Republic plan to build new nuclear power plants. Czech Republic has a long experience with that. For Poland, it would be the first. What are the positions of the national solar associations towards their nuclear energy projects of their countries?
I'm looking at Piotr.
Yeah, I'm thinking if there is an official statement from the Photovoltaic Association. Basically, those nuclear plants are so long-term visions in Poland. So I believe we will build all the required photovoltaic capacity until we have first megawatt from the nuclear plant delivered. So I would not put too much focus on that, because with the current plants, if I recall properly, the first megawatt is supposed to be delivered in 2033 with a very optimistic plan. We know how easily nuclear deployments are sticking to the development plans, so I would not pay too much attention to that.
Yeah, it's a bit different in the Czech Republic because, as you say, we already have nuclear installed. Our view is, if you look at the electricity map today, the reason why we're lighter than Poland is because of nuclear. That's a fact, and the reason why on many days the Czech Republic has lower emissions than Germany is because of nuclear. So coming from an environmental standpoint, of course, it is a low carbon source with all of its problems. And the main, again, we're the Solar Association, so we're not really concerned with other sources. It was rather the opposite way because, historically the defendants of nuclear rather disliking renewables. So it was rather fighting back against prejudice from their point of view. But again, it's a question of the timeline, as Piotr said. The plans for for nuclear are 2035, 2040, and we know that's 12 years, 17 years time. So much will happen, so much can happen, and we are rather preparing again in our rhetoric, in our narrative, where we're rather focusing on coal, because we're saying the coal exit will come earlier than 2033. New nuclear, according to plan, will be 2035 the earliest. What do we do in between? And then, of course, if we talk to people in the industry, a lot of them know that there's a big chance that nuclear won't be built in the end, because by the time the new projects will be ready to build, we might already have 15 gigawatts of solar and wind and storage, and you won't need them. Maybe, hopefully, but again, I don't really concern myself too much with nuclear.
Yeah, at least we can notice that nuclear would not be a transition fuel in this period. We can take one last question. Is there any question left? Yes, please, the gentleman on the front.
Yes, hello. I'm Alexander Krenek from Enphase Energy. How do you see the future of solar power manufacturing in your countries? And how does this factor in the current debate on the relaxing of state aid guidelines and the Net Zero Act? And because we are just started 1 month ago with production of equipment in Romania, and we would like to expand this kind of production. How do you see the future in your countries? Thank you.
Who wants to take it? Question of manufacturing?
Well,
Fabian?
then I just will start. We don't have this big manufacturing industry in Austria. We support it. I hope they get the support of the government they need, and we hope they're doing well and will increase. And I hope we'll bring our share to the European manufacturing goal, or increasing the European manufacturing.
There's a similar situation in Romania. We don't really have this market yet, but there are a lot of companies that are coming to our country to develop. So there were... Yes, we can talk later if you like. Yes, so there are it is a plan to build a wafer, I believe it was, wafer unit in Transylvania, somewhere around this area. So things are moving this direction. We don't really have anything concrete yet, but we are pretty open.
Any further remarks? Yeah.
Yeah, we have we see interest from a few companies to build a manufacturing plant in the Czech Republic. one of our members has plans and is currently approaching the Czech government, but also other governments. This will be, and I have to say, unless the Czech government wakes up, they will take their business elsewhere, because we don't really see the reaction that you would expect. Because we, as the association, we do receive inquiries from the public as and homeowners who want to put European or even Czech panels on their roofs and are willing to pay twice as much. So there is a market for this, even a small market, but there is a market for more expensive European panels. As we know, almost nobody produces it. And again, I say this at every conference, we can't pretend to be the solution for getting rid of our dependence on Russian gas if we then depend on Chinese panels. And I think at every one of our conferences we should play the video from the party congress of the Chinese Communist Party, where they publicly lead somebody away. And I don't know, we can't be reliant on countries like this. We have to be better than that, and our governments have to react and have to attract companies. And by the way, also those companies will need solar electricity to power that, because they will not want to produce solar power modules using coal, and especially having to pay for electricity.
Thanks indeed.
Last, if you
Mariana,
allow me.
A very
Very
last
quick.
comment before we conclude, because I have some insight from our event team to hurry up. So.
Great. So I'll be very quick. We last year, because of our National Recovery and Resilience Plan and the 6 gigawatts of storage that we had there as a target, and still is, by the way, but plans are getting delayed. We had a lot of talk about storage coming to Bulgaria, and a lot of solar manufacturers as well coming to look. At the end of the day, it's always a very tough decision of what the government will offer as incentive, how is the labor market there, whether it's easy to shore the supply chains and so on. It's a complex decision, but Eastern Europe has a lot to offer in that respect, Bulgaria and Romania too. So do speak to the national association, that's my advice.
Thanks indeed for this very insightful advice, Mariana, and thanks to all for your participation, for the exciting question we got. Just before we close the session and you all go for a well-deserved coffee break, I just wanted to share some special news with you. You all know that this is a bit serious news. You all know that in the last 24th February, was marked with a tragic anniversary, which was the one of the Russian invasion to Ukraine. I mean, in this time, I have particular thoughts to my Ukrainian colleagues and their family who are sometimes facing the reality of the war. So I think this is important to have a word for them. And in this crisis, I don't want to call it a crisis. It's really in these times of war, because it's more than a crisis. The sustained support to the country, to the infrastructure, is very important. And for this reason, the Solar Power Europe has launched the initiative Solar Supports Ukraine, which is a campaign with the German Industry Association, BSV, with the Ukrainian Solar Energy Association. And the aim is to install solar to provide power to hospitals and schools in Ukraine. I would therefore carry the message to consider donating to this campaign to help keep the lights on in Ukraine, keep the power on. You will find way more information about the campaign on the website solarsupportukraine.org, solarsupportukraine.org. So I have to thank you very much for your support, and more generally, thank you very much for your participation. I will now leave the floor to my colleague Naomi Chevilla, who will introduce you to the unusual suspects, so other member states doing well, and I wish you a pleasant continuation of the Solar Power Summit. Thanks a lot. Thanks indeed.
Worst popcorn.
Working? Okay. Okay, so I'm standing up. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to one of the last panels of today. So I hope you've enjoyed first our summit and our party yesterday, and I hope you still have some brain space to discuss our topic on unusual suspect. I think it's actually a nice topic. I'm sure we'll learn a lot. I learned a lot preparing this panel. So I hope you will be as interested as me. Who am I? Naomi Chevier. I'm Head of Regulatory Affairs at Solar Power Europe. And so what are we going to talk about? This year has actually, as you know, been an extraordinary year for solar PV, for the solar PV industry in Europe. We've added 41 gigawatts in 2022. That was a growth year on year of 47%. But some countries went a bit crazier with their own markets and added almost 80% of their annual markets from 2021 to 2022. You would think it's in sunny Spain or it's in the large fields of Romania, but no. It's in the countries which have the grimmest weather, the longest, snowiest, coldest winters, and the highest, probably, tolls of seasonal depression. Yeah. So this session will look at why on earth are you doing so good in the Nordics. So as to join me in this panel, I have distinguished panelists. Francesca Bjorn-Flaten, Senior Analyst at Rystad Energy, Conal Bolger, CEO at the Irish Solar Association, Jacob Klivager-Vestergaard, Head of Department Country and Market at Green Power Denmark, and Hanna Werner, CEO at the Swedish Solar Energy Association. A first look at the market to show you a bit the picture that we have in the Nordic countries, so going from Ireland to Finland. We have, as I was saying, a jump in markets. Of course, the markets in total numbers are lower than what we see in Spain or in Germany, but still a growth of 80%, and I think that's really notable, and it's interesting what's happening in these countries with a cumulative capacity of almost 24 gigawatts. So that's for the quick introduction, but without further ado, I will let Francesca give us the perspective of Rystad Energy on the markets.
Is it okay if I stand?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. All right. I'm just going to go around here, because then you can all see the screen as well. Okay, thank you very much, Naomi. I'm Francesca. I work at Rystad Energy. We are a market intelligence analysis and consultancy house, so we gather data and try to understand what's happening in the market, right? And thank you very much for inviting me to present here. I'm going to use this opportunity to be kind of a scene setter for more of the different countries that the rest of the panel here represents, and give you a bit of an overview, and not just looking at solar, but actually the share of solar in the power mix. And first, I just wanted to start with this slide, looking at the demand and supply for power in Europe in general, and then the next slide will be in the Nordics. So in general, in Europe, the demand up till 2050, according to Rystad Energy's base case, our power mix, is going to be in the transport sector. Now that's for Europe, and the demand, we're seeing the demand, of course, coming from a lot of solar. Just look at how big the solar is here. And just to be clear, the numbers that we're looking at up until 2022, that's actual numbers, reported numbers. And what I mentioned from 2022 to 2050, that is Rystad Energy's base case. So I guess the key takeaway here from this chart, you're looking at Europe in general, is demand coming mostly from the transport sector and also a bit from industry. And then we believe, of course, that coal will be completely phased out, gas phasing out as well, and then growth mainly coming from solar. And if we look at this exact same chart just for the Nordic countries, and I'm sorry, Connell, but Ireland is not part of the Nordics, so that's not part of this mix here. The countries we're looking at here is Scandinavia plus Finland, and I've not included Iceland because Iceland is their power mix is basically 100% hydro and very much renewables. It doesn't really make much sense to bring that in here. But you can see that where we believe the demand will be coming from when it comes to power is not as much from the transport sector as from the rest of, as we saw in the previous slide for Europe. We actually believe that most of the power, the demand will come from industry. From the industry. And what's also quite interesting is that within this industry is also hydrogen production, which we've included in here. And although we all want to be very positive about solar, you know, because that's why we're here to promote the solar industry, the solar supply, the power coming from solar is not expected to be as much as compared to rest of Europe, of course, not surprisingly. So going up long term to 2050, we see the most demand actually coming from offshore wind. But solar is there, and I believe all of the countries do expect this to be part of the power mix up long term to 2050. All right, so this is the power mix split on the different countries, right? So, and just by looking at it, it might look a little bit messy. So if we just start with Norway on the far left, you'll see that almost everything of the power we produce in Norway comes from hydro, right? And then secondly, it's onshore wind. And Norway has a big dominance when it comes to hydro, and the onshore wind industry in Norway has seen a big opposition. So we now actually currently have like a ban on all new onshore wind farms, which is starting to ease up a little bit. So Norway is kind of like the outlier here, because the other countries, they have quite a fragmented and quite a mix in their power mix. So they rely more on other sources. Sweden in particular and Denmark, they have nuclear and a big onshore wind as well. But what I noticed when I looked at this chart was actually the hydrogen electrolyzer. And because when we looked at this chart just a year ago, that blue part at the very top, that was barely there. So that's actually maybe a bit of an interesting observation, really. But solar, you can see that with the yellow here is predominantly in Denmark, and a little bit in Norway, but Denmark is probably what we see going to be the biggest kind of solar PV market in these countries. Okay, now focusing only on solar, since that's why we're here, right? I wanted to show you this chart because this is actually quite interesting. Now, this is not Rystad Energy data. This is taken from Solar Energy Journal. So this is a scientific journal, and this article has basically looks at the resource potential in the different European countries. And I've marked with green here Finland, Sweden, UK, and Denmark. And the resource potential for solar is amongst the lowest, which is not very surprising. But then the blue here is Netherlands and Germany, and resource potential-wise, they're actually more or less the same, right? The solar conditions and the potential in the Netherlands is same as Denmark or even Ireland. Sorry, I should have put this green since we're talking about Ireland as well. Actually,
I can point.
Yeah. So in that way, they make up the same arguments to deploy solar in the Nordic countries as well. But that's not the case. I mean, Germany, we know that Germany, they really are going for solar. They have installed loads of capacity. UK is actually also catching up really fast. But the numbers of installed capacity is of course much lower. So This is, I guess, can be used as an argument for why should there be such large differences between Germany and UK and the more of the northern countries. Okay, so this is my final slide, and I think this is kind of bridge as well over to the next panelists. It shows that there's large differences between the countries. So Denmark, they have mostly, utility scale. They're going for these utility scale, big scale solar PV farms. Sweden, the exact opposite. Here we have mostly, almost exclusively, rooftop, either on residential or commercial and industrial buildings, but utility also coming along. But big differences. And then Norway, while it's not really comparable, it was actually really difficult to do the split. But I can tell you this: we have one utility plant in Norway now. So this is also mostly residential, but it doesn't actually make any sense to do a split here. So with the same resource potential as for all the countries, more or less, also comparable, to Germany and UK, there are quite different strategies and approaches that these countries take when it comes to solar PV. So, but the final comment can be kind of what you mentioned, Naomi, that it doesn't look like this doesn't look that much, but if you compare it to the previous year, it's actually doubled and more than that. And the same goes with the other two countries. So 2022 has been an exceptional year for solar PV in all these three countries. Yeah. And I think that bridges it quite well. Over to you guys. Yeah.
Exactly. Thanks a lot for the presentation. So now we will turn to Ireland, specific case, which is since Ireland is also an island, and I'll give the floor to Colonel.
Okay, thanks very much. We don't just share high rates of seasonal affective disorder, we also share high rates of alcoholism, so it's good, just for accuracy. I'm going to talk to you about Ireland, and it's really a market that is in a lot of flux across all the kind of vectors, both the kind of micro, non-residential, commercial, and the utility scale. And it's kind of all happened very quickly. So in a couple of years, we're going to go effectively from 0 to gigawatt market. So we expect to be gigawatt this year probably, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that and why that's happened and why it's of benefit to Ireland to pursue solar. Just at a symbolic level, though, if some of you are lucky enough to visit my country, you will find on your flight path in a lot of cases, a 200 megawatt solar farm being built by Statkraft, less than 20 minutes drive from the airport. So the first thing that people are going to see in Ireland, famously known for wind, is a large-scale solar farm. So 3 facts about the market that will really tell you why which will probably make you want to run away from it as a market. There are parts of Ireland that get between 180 and 200 days of rain. We generate 40% of our electricity from wind. And this year we installed more solar than wind at a utility scale for the first time ever. Reliably informed that we expect that trajectory to continue for the next 5 years. So we'll talk a bit about just the added value that solar PV brings to the market. So I'm just going to see if you can see those. Okay. So one of the benefits of having gone after wind in a big way is that we have a lot of heavily correlated renewable generation in the middle of the night, which is unfortunately not when we need it at times. So that's also led to a growth in a storage fairly active kind of short-term duration storage market. So a lot of batteries coming on board. But there's still an issue in the middle of the day. And what that means in our electricity market is the prices are quite high in the middle of the day. So that's when the more inefficient plant turns on. So the dirtier assets tend to be on in the middle of the day. And AFRY found when they ran the analysis for ourselves, I'll tell you what the lines mean in a second, that if you ramp up your solar as part of your generation mix in the middle of the day, you knock the dirtier assets off. So our renewables target is 80% of our electricity mix by 2030. It was previously 70%, so that's what this analysis was done on. And what those lines are the profile of your emissions over the course of a day. And the green line, the lowest one, is in the higher solar ambition scenario, and the brown one would have been no further solar than what we had at that moment in time. So essentially, the message is, if you add more solar, it decarbonizes parts of the power system that the other technologies just can't get to. What we're also finding, we're doing more data analysis on it at the moment, and we hope to do more site-level correlation analysis, is that there does seem to be in the northern European countries, the wind-solar correlation seems to be quite strong. So the green area and the yellow area the green area is a kind of a wind profile from a very windy day, dropped it on a kind of conventional solar portfolio, and then layered on kind of the demand curves for kind of, you know, high demand day and a low demand day. And what you start seeing really is that if you start layering in a lot more solar into the electricity mix, you become able to green the electricity throughout the day. So you start getting closer to 24/7 green power. And ultimately what we're here to do is deliver green kilowatt hours. Panels and turbines are just a way to get to that. But it is very important in terms of like that relationship. You need to think about it as a portfolio. And what's quite, as an industry, what we found is that the solar industry, storage industry, and the wind industry onshore, all of us have realized we've quite common interests here in moving the dial. So we do a lot of kind of work together. Big advantage solar has is deployment speed, you know, subject to the grid being there, and grid, we'll talk about it, and I spend a lot of my time dealing with grid. But in terms of potential deployment, so one of the reasons solar has really been taking off is the rate at which it's getting through the process. So the about time spent in planning bar histogram on the left-hand side there, that's 24 weeks for solar on average to get its planning permission. That compares to years for some wind farms have been sitting in planning for years, just waiting. And in our system, it's quite sequential. You get planning, then you get grid, then you go into your auction, or your alternate route to market, then you go into your financing. The other point worth noting is that in planning, solar has been having a success rate of 86%. When it goes to appeal, that's closer to 97%. So it's generally powering through. So again, we've built up quite a high portfolio of solar. So what we're finding is that like when our wind colleagues are concerned about the planning process, we're more interested in the delivery phase because we've a lot of projects closer to realization. And just generally, there's a broader societal value point. We'll be doing our third CFD auction in September this year, and the results suggest that if solar was to be, a high wind, there's potentially you could provide 824 million societal value to Ireland between 2026 and 2040. And that's before we start thinking about microgen. We had a university look at the microgen potential, and they were they say it could potentially provide up to about 25% of all residential power demand in the country, with a bill saving of €450 per year. Now that number was made. That report was released in May last year, and when a back of the envelope calculation done even a month later suggests that number is closer to €600. That's quite a small system. It's like a 3.5 kilowatt system. What we're seeing with the commercial projects, this is an area where it's really beginning to get interesting. We're seeing paybacks of 12 to 18 months for some of the commercial projects, even small residential. A pub in Cork reporting that the system paid for itself in the first year, so they're delighted. And what's happening, I suppose, in Ireland is that all the vectors are moving in parallel. So what you're going to see, the graph at the top is kind of the potential. So one of the kind of scenarios we're seeing is that most of the capacity is going to be utility scale, but there's going to be a high volume of installations at the kind of non-utility scale. And one of the things that kind of struck me this year was that there's the picture that comes with this, that's me on a megawatt rooftop. So we're installing megawatt rooftops in the C&I space. We're installing small microgen. The DSO and the TSO really don't know what to do with all the solar. We'll talk about that a little bit in the discussion. But in effect, we're coming hard. So currently there's 640 megawatts utility scale solar, either energized or under construction. That's a mix of CFD auction and CPPA. So we've had 900 megawatt corporate PPA this year at Microsoft that was announced. There's a lot more signed than that, but of course they're all shrouded in secrecy. That scale would be rather helpful if it had some numbers. But essentially, they're based on the portfolio and the potential. You're talking a market that could be something of the order of 7 to 10 gigawatts by 2030. We're really kind of the drivers of that have been a range of things. I suppose we've had this big portfolio built up, and it was waiting for policy, and I'll talk quickly about the policy changes next. We've seen it, the kind of general skepticism around solar in Ireland has really shifted over the course of the last year, and that was probably reflected in just to give a sense of what 2022 was like as a policy making. In 21, towards the end, there was a solar target announced of 1.5 to 2.5 gigawatts, which concerned us all because we'd just come out of an auction where we won 800 megawatts. The December 21, they announced a microgeneration support scheme. So it's an export tariff for homeowners, but there was no detail, and that was all to be done via regulation. In June 22, solar cleared 1.5 gigs in the second CFD auction. Solar won about 79% of the capacity. The third one of those was in September, as I think I mentioned earlier. In summer, suppliers finally started offering the export tariffs, which had been long awaited, and the residential planning restrictions were finally removed. So we had you had to do planning permission in a lot of cases unless your system was below a certain envelope, and it was quite a small envelope. What happened with that was that even though those measures only took effect in kind of Q3, Q4, last year we saw 17,000 microgeneration installations in Ireland. Doesn't sound like a lot, but the total number is 47,000. So about a third went in just last year. We're expecting something more equivalent to an annual run rate, about 25,000, 30,000 per year once it all gets up and running more properly. Recognizing all this, our climate action plan came out in December 22, and the 2030 target went from 1.5 gigs to 8 gigs. And we were also told we had a target of 5 gigs by 2025. Again, also, the energy market fluctuations and the price exposure generated by the Ukrainian war was a big driver of the accelerated solar target. There was also an element of convincing policymakers that this was real, that this was happening, that these projects are here, and you need to basically get out of the way. And that kind of led to that framing. So hopefully that provides a bit of a jumping off point for a conversation.
Thanks a lot, Colonel, and for the presentation. So I think Anna is next to talk about Sweden. If you have burning questions, of course, raise your hand and we can take questions about the presentation. But I don't see any hands, so the floor is yours.
Questions on Ireland? No. Okay, so this was Sweden yesterday. And that's our homepage. I am from the Swedish Solar Energy Association, svensksolenergi.se. We have a lot of graphs and statistics on our homepage. If you just do the About Us page and click on the English flag, because I only brought one graph today, so you have to go there if you want to have all these staples and diagrams. This is Northern Light, but go to this. I put up a lot of new statistics actually yesterday, so you have a lot on this homepage. And before I talk about Sweden, we are a part of Europe, so I just want to say that Sweden stands fully on Ukraine's side, as you can see. We even have the same colors in our flags. There are many things to be very proud of in Sweden. But there are also things that we are not so proud of, and it is my second last slide, and it's the price of energy during or electricity at daytime. So this is from Wednesday and Thursday last week. Is this a pointer? No. Okay, so starts at midnight and it ends at midnight, and you can see Wednesday is the red curve, and it's very high prices daytime and very low prices during the night of electricity. This is Swedish money per kilowatt hour. And it's a pity because this is the reason for this is that we don't have so much solar energy in Sweden. So we can't get down the prices daytime. And it looks actually a little bit the same during summer. Still very high prices when the sun is out, which is ludicrous. It should be for free. So this was my graph, 2 days last week. There are many ways to catch the sun, and we're working on it in Sweden. We have 2 of these installations now, agrivoltaics. As you can see, the snow doesn't stick on the panels. It helps, it gives a lot of reflection, and they put them from north to south so that you get the low-standing sun from west and east. But we have a lot of traditional installations already. The market is booming in Sweden. We have the 1 new gigawatt last year, so we are on 2.6 gigawatts now installed effect. But it's the 5th largest country in Europe, so surface-wise we stand for 5% of Europe, so I think 2.6% of the installations, it's not enough. Yes, we are a little bit behind. We've been behind the Europe many times. Like when you were in the Middle Ages, we were still in the Stone Ages, and, you know, and we are a little bit behind on solar, but we're getting there very fast, and we're working on it. We have to improve all these systems, and we have to think a little bit different sometimes. But Sweden is definitely going solar. We already have 1% of the electricity production, so we celebrate that for 2022. Yeah, and this is the homepage where you will find all the information that you didn't get from me now. Svensk Solenergi. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. There's only one way to go to 100%, start by 1%, so...
Yeah.
Okay, so we can finish the tour of the Nordics with Denmark and your presentation, and Jacob.
Thank you very much. Actually, you were very much in front of Denmark when you were walking over the ice in the 1600s and trying to invade Denmark. Yeah, that's also 500 years ago. There actually is a law right now where you can, if the Swedish is walking over the ice, it's a law that you can shoot them. A Danish law, old law.
Okay. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, but I'm from Green Power Denmark, and we are a trade organization for the whole electricity chain. So I'm both representing the solar panels and the windmills, and actually also the DSOs from our point of view. What we are going to talk about today is why is it that that solar panels is making good sense in Denmark, and what is happening right now with the electricity system. If we are looking into this, I don't know if there's no. If you're looking into this graph, you can see the production of energy in Denmark, or power production of electricity production in 2021. As we see, there is about 7 terawatt hours from coal. We have about 8 from biomass. We have about 9 from onshore wind, and about 8 terawatt hours from the offshore wind. And then we have a little bit solar, 1 terawatt hours in 2021, and that has grown a lot. But the main thing about this graph is that we are going from 2021, where we have about 31 terawatt hours of production, where a lot of it is coming from coal and biomass, where we in 2030 have a consumption of electricity to about 107 or 104 terawatt hours. And we are suggesting that about 50 of those terawatt hours in 2030 should be coming from onshore wind and solar PV. And the government in Denmark is suggesting that we are about 20 gigawatts is coming from solar PV and about 20 from the onshore wind production. So we have a big challenge ahead of us, and that's one of the reasons we are trying to come to the demand. We are trying to produce that much of new solar and wind energy in the next few years. And this is the graph from how the capacity of solar PV has been involved the last 10 years. As we were in 2012, we had a big involvement in capacity of solar PV because we had a great subsidy scheme for the rooftops. But afterwards, the installation capacity was stalled in a lot of years. So when I asked the question, why is it that solar PV is booming in Denmark, the great answer, the simple answer was because it's not now on subsidy schemes, it is now on the free market to determine how the solar panels is being set up. And as we can see, we had in 2022, we had a huge boom where we installed about 1.2 gigawatt, where we before installed about 500 or 300 megawatts before that. So there's been a huge installed capacity in 2022. And one of the reasons for that is actually that we have a new tariff system that was started here the 1st January of 2023. That is going to make the capacity of solar panels a lot lower in 2023. So that's one of the reasons. And why is it that it does make sense to install solar in Denmark as well? As my first slide suggested or said was that we had a lot of wind production in our system, and we can see that the solar and wind production is going very well together. When we have the solar production in the summer, we usually don't have that much wind, and when we have a lot of wind, we usually don't have that. We don't have that much solar production. So when you have the systems to penetrate the electricity through wind, you also have the system to penetrate for solar PVs. So this is one of the reasons we're also looking into a lot of new parks where you're actually both using solar and windmills in the same park. It's a hybrid park, and this is going to be one of the reasons we also push forward for more subsidy-free schemes for solar and wind, and this will be the consumption for PTX is also going to put this forward for the hybrid parks as well. The last thing I was looking into when I was asked the question why we are seeing a lot of solar PVs in Denmark, I found this. This is a question we asked for some of the. It's a poll we made a year ago, and as we can see, there is a lot of commitment to both the offshore wind and the solar PVs for the in general areas of the opinion. So when we ask the opinion, people will see that solar PVs is one of the good things to add on. If we look at should Denmark make more production from solar PV, there's only 4% who disagree. And I can see I didn't translate this. And this is for the municipalities. Would your municipalities support that there will be taken initiative to make an solar PV park, a utility scale park in your municipality? And we also see that's only 9% of the opinion which disagree with utility scales parks in the municipalities. So there is a lot of support for the solar PVs, and it strongly supports the wind section as well, and that's one of the reasons I think that the solar PV scale is going up in Denmark. Yeah. That's it.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I think we can just, yeah.
Thank you.
And for the insights, so now I think we can move to a quick discussion part. If you have questions, prepare them because we'll also take your questions.
There's a question. Already a question.
There's already a question, but let's.
It's just a question to understand to the colleague from Denmark. The capacities you were mentioning for solar, are they nominal capacity or is it AC capacity?
Nominal capacity.
So it's the peak power?
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. One question. Perfect. Yes. Nicolas.
Oh. Are you okay? You okay?
Hi, Nicola Gazos. Thanks for the presentations. And a very quick question, which I think probably affects every country. So permitting is less of an issue, obviously, in the Nordics than in Southern Europe. But what about grid connection of bigger plants, so high voltage?
Can I correct you? We have a large problem with permitting in Sweden.
Oh, okay.
For large-scale solar. We don't have any large-scale solar. The largest park in Sweden, the largest installation is 19 megawatts, 19.
Okay.
So nobody has built anything larger than that.
I can
And
also
it's
add
because
that-
they don't get the permission.
Yeah, Norway also has a lot of issues.
Just
Okay.
so we're talking
So-
about the same thing.
So I'll start anew.
Okay.
Apart from problems, so what is the situation with grid connecting? Because I mean, the goals also. I mean, what's happening in Ireland? I know the Danish case a bit better, but you know, a lot of big-scale projects are about to come online, and you need a couple of years to permit them. But then, at the final stage, you need to design the high voltage.
So
infrastructure.
we're fine. So our
yeah.
grid is grid's probably issue number one in the Irish market. There's a few issues. One has been non-delivery by the networks company, the large-scale enabling infrastructure. So basically, they just can't move the power. So we're experiencing a lot of localized constraints, and at the national level, you know, curtailing down assets. There's a lot of that. We're already seeing risk of oversupply, and our TSO is saying that when we add, you know, you saw the demand figures, and you saw that's just with onshore renewables. You throw offshore on top of that, and like our oversupply problem goes crazy. So there's a real need for a few things. One is we actually just need to build network. We need to start rolling out network, and the TSOs are looking at that. How do we do that? How do we do the enabling infrastructure? There's a big pipeline of projects. The TSO wants all the projects to be somewhere. The projects themselves are going, well, I've been developing for 7 years, mate, so you know, I've spent a lot of money. So how we make those two things marry up is going to be a big thing. And the other thing is the system management. So how we can operate our system at 75% instantaneous penetration renewables. So at a moment in time, we can manage 75% wind. We've got to get that up to like 100%. And so there's a lot of work streams ongoing to do that. So it's about delivering infrastructure, it's system management, and then it's that diversity of portfolio that I think myself and our Danish colleague talked about.
Yeah, exactly. I think given especially the volumes that were developed in Denmark, you're facing also some issues with grids.
Yeah, we're seeing into a lot of issues with the grid connection as well. We don't have the grid to manage all the new capacity which is getting to installed. And from 2023 here, they made a new tariff, a large tariff, which is going to stop all the small small utility scale panels. I don't think you will see a smaller park than 80 or perhaps 100 megawatts in Denmark in the next years because of this new grid connection charge.
We're having the same thing with like just projects are scaled up. You know, you're not going to see the 5-10 megawatts projects anymore.
But then again, just to add up, you know, you have, let's say, 2 years of permitting, 3 years perhaps, and then when you're close to the finish line, you need to take care about substations, step-up substations, switchyards, and there is long lead items there that currently probably you need to order high voltage power transformer, and it comes 12 or 18 or even 20 months after the purchase order is placed. So how would that affect, or is there something that mitigates the effects of that delay?
It was a big issue for, we had our first auction in 2020, and about 800 megawatts of solar cleared. And for all of them, they had a delivery date of 22, 23, and the grid became the problem. It's the single lead item. And what happens as well, of course, is that when you take 18 months to get there, the price that was fine in 2020, you get to 2022, the world's changed a lot, and it wasn't so good. So we had a lot of projects dropping out, going into corporate, or just killing the project stone dead. And that was also linked with like connection costs going up a lot, for the very similar reasons you were talking about. Sorry, I cut across you.
Just a small comment as well. We the TSOs and the DSOs has actually been demanded to make a geographical connection difference. So in the place where there is the places where there are are connecting, easy connection for the grid, there is a lower price for the connection than in the areas where there isn't. So that's one of the things they're trying to adjust in the market as well. But we will see some problems.
We're seeing that spatial thing too. They're actually talking about trying to align the auctions with where the grid capacity is going to be. So rather than letting the pipeline lead them to build the grid, they're going to build the grid where they want and tell you to try and drive projects there.
Since we are on the grid, because one thing that you showed very clearly that was very interesting in Ireland was the complementarity with solar and wind, and you mentioned that one of the potential business model for the future was hybrid systems. Do you see a future for these kind of systems? Is there a framework developed?
There isn't a framework, so that's the problem. We need a framework. So what's basically what you really need is an ability to share the capacity at the connection point. So an ability to, whatever the assets are, whether solar and storage, solar and wind, solar and storage, which would be tricky, but good luck, and make those work. The market settlement rules all need changing to accommodate these different kind of assets. But all of these are paper regulatory changes. They're not like real changes. So we're in the middle of a bit of a fight with the system operator. The TSO has had this in their desk for 8 years and they've done nothing with it. We knew we needed hybrid sites 8 years ago and we're moving forward. Now the flip side of that is the opportunity, because one of the reasons there is an opportunity, and the reason our grid connections are expensive is because they overspec the connection. So when people come to work in Ireland, they're shocked at the requirements of the grid. By the way, if you do have an Irish portfolio, do look at your connection costs. And because basically what they do is they kind of spec the network for this worst case scenario. So it's min demand, maximum renewables output. So they're designing the system for a windy, sunny night, effectively. Shockingly enough, the grid connections, all the infrastructure is really big. What that means, though, is you have a lot of you've spare capacity in there. So if you get smart in how you manage it, you start dropping solar farms on a lot of those existing wind sites. There's opportunity, and what we're seeing is that a lot of the solar pipeline at the utility scale, when they're going in for planning, they're going for planning for solar farm and a battery in anticipation of the policy moving.
How about Sweden?
All the same.
Yeah.
No, it's all the same. Yeah. You want to use the connection for both, and you want to be able. We don't really have the agreements set already, but to have if we take down the production, during these hours, and but we don't have that yet. But we're working for it.
Just a small comment again. I think my Irish friend here was also mentioning that they were making direct lines, and I think we will see that as a thing that will be going on as well for both the wind and the solar panels and the PTX production with a direct line, and that's one of the things I think we'll be pushing forward.
I think both of our markets have a lot of data centers coming in, and
also
they're creating problems for us. So it's a nice solve for that issue as well.
How about winters? And what's the opportunity for solar in the winter? And does it? Yeah. How do you bring that in your markets? Can we expect solar to produce in winters, or on the other hand, does it make the case for storage and maybe longer duration storage? Are there synergies with hydro? Maybe in Sweden?
We have a lot of hydro. We have a few, I think 2 hydro plants with batteries also. So they are our hybrid hydro battery. But what we do want to do is to use wind and solar when we can, and then save the hydro for the winter. What is very sad in Sweden is that we use a lot of electricity for heating, actually, which is a very sad problem with the system. So, but we do get some solar electricity also in January and February. If you go to our homepage, you will find the curves. But they're actually, it's not zero. You can really see that we already have some solar. There is sun. I mean, between now it's like from 9 to 5 or something. So it's not that bad.
Francesca, you wanted to?
No, I mean. if you think about, like, if you go really up north, so I'm based in Oslo, that's south in Norway, but if you go really up to like Tromsø or even Svalbard, which is an island almost close to North Pole, during summertime the sun never sets, right? So there you kind of, maybe you add up for that lost solar during winter.
You also have to remember electricity prices are high. So if you're a microgeneration, for example, like you definitely see people benefiting in winter months from, my Twitter feed is alive with councillors who've all installed solar recently, and they're all really excited about, they didn't pay a lot, the big bills in November and December. But you also have to remember, it's back to that point about a complementary system as well. Like, these are high, do you know what's really good in the winter? Wind. What's really good in the summer is sun. So kind of it's taking that kind of holistic view. Yes, solar will generate most of the electricity during the summer months. That's true. You still get sun days in the winter, and I suppose like this is where like solar's superpower is its predictability. You know, the forecast error on solar is, I think, something like less than half a percent in a lot of markets. So you know what it's going to do. For a system operator, you've a renewable variable source that you know when it's going to generate and largely how much it's going to make. That's golden. They'll take that.
And we were just discussing before we came on stage that for those who install rooftop PV, residentials, they might not even rely on their solar panels during the winter months. So they just basically going to install rooftop PV for the summer months. But the snow, the snow helps a lot. So I think in Norway we will only see these bifacial panels. So you can take advantage of both the top side and the downside of the panels because of the reflection of the snow. And on a sunny day with loads of snow, it's really intense. It can be really intense. So the snow can also be beneficial.
Yeah,
and it's good shelter in the rain.
You don't have the snow problem.
And we have high energy prices. Like we had very high in August and September also, and because of the war, of course, but also because we were renovating our nuclear, and I think France had some problems with theirs.
Yes.
So it's not just the winter months.
So it's a question of complementarity with what's there or what's not there.
Our vision is not to have 100% solar in Sweden, but we say 15 right now.
I don't think that's the goal for any of the northern countries to be,
No, I also heard from the Norwegian Solar Industry Association that there is a case for BIPV actually to capture more light in the mornings and.
Well, you get that double peak as well. So, like if you've there's a lot of dairy farming in Ireland, so it's one of the things that they're kind of interested in that kind of production because that's when they need power. It's mornings and evenings.
And maybe a last element that we also discussed is that the Nordics are also more electrified than at least in certain countries. But I'm thinking of, for example, Norway has the highest rate of EVs per capita, and EVs and PVs are working perfectly together. So, do you think that will also help? Do you see people being driven by that as well, having my own PV to power the EV?
I mean, I don't know how it is in Sweden, but in Norway, it's not like it's not a public consensus that this is a good idea. But you have individuals who think it's an exciting technology, and so they definitely do this on their own initiative. But I don't think Norway's there yet. And when it comes to electrification, yes, EVs is very common. You can see that almost everywhere, but I think it's actually the heavy industry that's going to drive the electricity demand in Norway.
And in Sweden also.
Yeah. And they are the heavy industry in Norway is already electrified, but now they want that to be even better in a way. They want to improve that with their own systems. Yeah.
Like for us, a lot of it, there's electrification and kind of heat. A lot the policy is very much to electrify, go after heat pumps, go after EVs. But a lot of demand growth is coming from data centers, pharmaceuticals, and one of the things we're definitely seeing, there's a lot of pressure coming on from the big tech sector about 24/7 renewables and ability, the whole point of additionality. They don't just want corporate PPAs, they want to connect it directly to an asset and go, I know I've got the green power because it's coming down the wire from that over there.
Yeah, the data center is pretty clear that they want 100% of the power from from renewables. That's one of the issues actually we are looking into.
Yeah,
also,
But if I may
because,
ask, so
yeah.
these data centers do they solely go for PPAs? Is that what they want to do?
No, we're saying they're not enabled to do a proper direct line in Ireland, so we want
Okay.
them to do direct lines and private wires because they want to get there. One of the things they're also trying to do is do the kind of dynamic grid settlement ancillary services models because they're going, well, I have a big generator that can provide grid services. Yeah, they're really big. I think it's about 14% of electricity demand last year from a data center, so they are big. They have an effect on what happens on the system, and it's more than rural towns. So we're having quite a debate at the minute that the data centers are becoming a little toxic because of that issue, particularly because they're being seen to drive high prices in the market as well.
Is there a couple of questions? Yes, so we can start with the lady and the two person at the back. Yeah. No.
Which one? Sorry. That's okay. Hi, I'm Julie Beaufils from Europe On, which is the European Association of Electrical Contractors. So our Swedish members are, wait for it, Installatörsföretagen. No, it doesn't work.
Installatörsföretagen.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. That's what I said. And no, I had a question for you for the Swedish perspective, because our Swedish members shared with us a study a while ago on the fact that because solar was booming so much in Sweden, there are many companies starting to install rooftop PV. And there's been this analysis showing that in quite an overwhelming number of cases, there are faults and risks associated with those installations. We think, I mean, as the on the installer side, we think that there's probably a lack of certification, and the market is a bit too free. That's also that. I mean, Sweden is known for a very liberal approach to the market. But yeah, I just wanted to know your perspective on the other side of the.
No, I completely agree. It goes very fast. And there are a lot of not serious companies. If you mean labor security and so on the roof, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and fire hazards, etc. Yeah.
And thank God we have not yet have anybody fallen down from the roof while mounting PV. And I don't want it to happen. So we work very hard with that question. So Ludwig here, he works with our certification system full time actually, when he's not here. And so what we do is that we have a certificate for the individuals who work on the roof. And we started a year ago, and we already have 500 certified people.
So a voluntary scheme, I suppose.
It's a voluntary scheme.
Yeah.
And now, a couple of weeks ago, we decided that it's free for our member companies. So you can if you become member in our organization, you can put in 10 people in that, for free. So we expect to have more than 1,000 in a year. And they can still make mistakes, but at least they know what is right and wrong. And we also have a large problem with a lot of people. They think they are electricians, but they are not. So it's very much focused on what am I allowed to do, what am I not allowed to do, and also on safety and security. And can I do this? My boss tells me to do this, but the manual says this. What shall I do? So I agree. It's a very big and serious question. Because if we only have one person who falls off the roof, we will go from the best in class to the worst. So we don't want that to happen.
Maybe before we wrap up, I just wanted to take two small questions.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for a productive discussion. I would like to ask if there are any projects have been implemented with floating PV, and how do you see floating PV prospective for your countries? Water oriented.
And maybe a question at the back, if you're.
Okay, thank you. Very short question, Laurent Drillon from Total Energy. Just Finland and Luxembourg have taking part to a cross-border tender. Is there any option to other Nordic countries, to taking part in such mechanism. Okay.
I can start with the floating.
Floating PV.
Yeah. Norway had one pilot project run by Equinor, but then it got closed. So that's yeah. So it's not. So currently we had a project and then it wasn't realized. But we can be optimistic about this. We have there are companies, I think 4 or 5 companies actually in Norway who wants to go for, and this is important, offshore floating PV. So not necessarily those on dams or lakes, but actually offshore. And this just goes, it's just because it goes very well with the Norwegian competence of offshore oil and gas. So we have a lot of offshore competence that. But I think it's an extremely immature technology, and so like we're talking 30s, 2030s, 50s, 40s before we see this. If this will happen in Norway before rest of the world, I don't think so actually. I think we'll see this off other coasts.
Jacob, I saw you nodding on the potential of floating.
Yeah, we have. I've been with a dialogue with a potential member of our organization, and I think they are looking into it. But they will experience a lot of looking a lot of Norway and the experience that they made there. I think there can be a potential on the long term, but not in the short term. Not in Denmark. Would be my view.
But I mean, the best thing about floating PV is that you can't see it. So for all of those that not in my backyard sentiment, that kind of solves that issue. So and at least in Norway, there's a huge wind opposition, and it's opposition about we don't want to see anything really. Norwegians. So in that term, I think this could be definitely gain a lot of social acceptance. This floating PV. Yeah.
And on the cross-border projects, the cooperation, I remember that Denmark and Germany had a joint auction.
There's lots of cooperation between the countries right now. I think Norway, both Denmark and Germany and Poland, and is going through the what's called the sea between Poland and Germany and Denmark. And there is also another joint session in the North Sea with Netherlands and Norway and Denmark and Germany as well. So there is lots of projects. It's mostly offshore wind that I know of.
So soon offshore solar.
I'm not sure if there are any solar projects that is cross-bordered actually.
Yeah. I think what Laurent we were referring to is rather investment, cross-investment, cross countries. Yeah. I think Luxembourg. I think it's an initiative from Luxembourg as well to go and invest abroad. All right, I think we have to close here and do the coffee break that was promised to you before the session. So I hope you enjoyed the session. You know the speakers, you can talk to them or enjoy their sense of humor. Thanks for your attention and have a nice rest of the day.